Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule and your personal life to come down here and listen to some information about Father Bill's Mainspring and their anticipated expansion of services to homeless. We're going to be joined with some people from Mainspring. At first, I'd like to indicate that I have a colleague, Councilor Susan DeCastro, up and back, who stopped by. Councilor Rita Mendez just left. She'll be back. I believe State Representative Jerry Cassidy is back there. I'm Councilor at Large Winthrop Farwell, City Council President. This is Councilor Dennis Ianieri from Ward 3. And this is April Conley, who is Chief Operating Officer of Father Bill's. So we met with, by Zoom, we met with Father Bill's several weeks ago. And a lot of information was presented, and at that point, we really felt it was important to present firsthand that information to the community. And Father Bill's Mainspring is well known downtown. John Yaswinski is well known to all of us. So it just seemed important to hold a meeting, and we will have Q&A at the end. It's not going to be a long, drawn-out presentation, but again, we thank you for coming. We thank you for listening. As the meeting progresses, I hope you will remember any questions that you want to ask at the end. I neglected to mention Robert Jenkins from the Brockton Redevelopment Authority, Executive Director, and I think Sydney is that. And excuse me, the Mayor's Chief of Staff is here. The Mayor is in Boston on an important assignment relative to selling bonds, which is going to save the city quite a bit of money. So with that, I'll turn it over to April, and we welcome you.
Can everybody hear me okay? Thank you, Councilor Farwell, and thank you to Councilor Ianieri and all the councilors and representatives here, and thank you to the residents of Brockton and the staff of Father Bill's who have taken time out to be here. Certainly, I'm excited to talk to you tonight about our prospective project at the Manley Street site. First, want to just acknowledge John Yaswinski, the CEO of Father Bill's and Mainspring, is here as well. And my two daughters are here, and one has a birthday tomorrow. So, so again, I thought I'd start just by a show of hands. How many of you are familiar with Mainspring House? Okay, so I'm just going to talk very briefly about the backdrop around Father Bill's and Mainspring House, since you're all pretty familiar with our organization. We were founded in 1982 by an interfaith group and business leaders, and Mainspring was opened in 1983. Mainspring is located, which I learned about 10 years after working for the organization, is actually named after the Main and Spring Streets, which is a nice little bit of trivia that took me far too long to learn. And sad to say, I grew up in Brockton, so I really should have known it. But since Mainspring was founded as a small emergency shelter, Father Bill's in Mainspring has really grown to be a leader in the work to end homelessness. We're a regional organization. We have over 600 units of permanent supportive housing. On any given night, we permanently house more tenants than we accommodate guests at our emergency shelters in both Quincy and Brockton. And that's something that a lot of people who have known of Mainspring don't realize about Father Bill's and Mainspring. We really are a housing organization, and we're in the business of ending homelessness. In our permanent housing programs, which many of you may be familiar with, and many are pictured right here on these boards, 99% of the people who are placed into our supportive housing program stay housed for a year, and 93% stay housed for 3 years. Now, when we think about the people we house in our programs, we house the most vulnerable, the people with the most complex needs, the people who would be unsuccessful in most traditional housing, would be kicked out because of their difficulties, their mental health conditions, and the like. And we're able to stabilize those folks and help support them in housing. But Mainspring House accommodates, and these numbers I'll share with you briefly are really pre-COVID, since you all are familiar. We during COVID times had to social distance and really limit the number of folks we welcomed into our emergency shelter. But typically, Mainspring House serves 1,000 unduplicated people any year. And that translates to about 140 people every night come to our doors for emergency shelter. 20% of those are considered chronically homeless. So what that means is that they've been homeless a very long time. They typically have other really complicated issues going on. Many are elders. About 20% of our population are elderly, and that is the fastest growing population amongst the homeless in the country and in our region. We are very concerned about how we are going to help older people who have physical limitations, some with other complex behavioral health issues, end their homelessness when we don't have adequate housing, and the facilities we're accommodating them in for emergency shelter just simply can't meet their needs. They're in overcrowded dormitory environments, as Mainspring is. So right now, what we know is that the current model of warehousing people in overcrowded situations just simply isn't sustainable, and it's not working. Accommodating people at 4:30 in the afternoon until 7 in the morning, and then having to ask them to leave because we don't have adequate resources during the day, and sending them out onto the streets where they really don't have anywhere to go and there are limited services for them is not good for them, and it's not good for the community. So we're proposing and are in the process of developing in Quincy, and would like to do the same here in Brockton, a new model to respond to the homeless issue that we are all facing. And that's the Housing Resource Center model. And what that is really a robust investment in the front door of the homeless system for individuals. It really is about best practice, evidence-based practice, nationally recognized interventions being placed in the facilities where people are coming for help, trying to resolve people's housing crisis as far in advance of them becoming homeless as we can. And so that is investing in prevention resources, diversion resources, rehousing resources when we aren't able to prevent them from needing an emergency shelter bed. And yes, still accommodating those folks who do need a bed by providing emergency shelter beds. But we know that investing in the back door and in the emergency shelter system isn't working. Putting all the resource into the bed isn't helping that person resolve their crisis, and it's certainly not helping the community end homelessness, which is really what I think we all share an interest in. No one wants to see people outside. No one wants to see people without homes. So this model sounds wonderful, and we really do believe that it can reduce and eventually end homelessness, but we were really hurdled or saddled with inadequate facilities and resources and space. So we came across this opportunity at Manley Street, which is, I'll get into a little bit of the nature of the site, and we're recently awarded it. And so this is really our opportunity to introduce this new model to the Brockton homeless issue. We are, as I mentioned, currently developing a site that reflects this model in Quincy. We expect to break ground in the next couple of months. Sure, it's at 39 Brockton Street, so it's right across the street from our current. I lost for 30. Thank you. Can you hear me okay now? So the site in Quincy that we're in the process of developing and received over $20 million in funding and raised capital financing to support the development is located at 39 Broad Street. It's directly across the street from our current Father Bill's emergency shelter in Quincy. This received incredible state and local support There is a lot of a lot of people believe in this model, and our project in Quincy reflects that. So there is a Title V site located at 124 Manley Street, and I am, if it's okay, going to stand up just so I can reference the boards here. Many of you were able to kind of walk around so I can point to things. I tend to walk a lot when I talk to people, so I apologize if that's distracting, and to the camera. But the Title V property was brought to our attention, which is a federally owned site. It was a former Army Reserve location. And Title V properties are mandated to be disposed of by the federal government for the use of homeless services and housing for marginalized groups. So it really is intended to serve the same population that we serve here in Brockton. So we applied for this site, and we were conditionally awarded earlier this year. So we felt very strongly and agreed with the council that it was time to present this opportunity to the community, certainly give an opportunity to answer any questions, but I would really stress this is very preliminary. We've developed some renderings, and we are in the process of applying for financing, but we haven't even really assessed the site for buildability. So this is very much preliminary, but we're really excited about it. So what you'll see over here is a rendering of the site. And what we intend to develop is the existing building, which is the Army Reserve facility, will be retrofitted to be our housing resource center. And so if you looked at this very complicated diagram, which I've come to love looking at floor plans, you'll see all the layout and all the services that we're able to offer people in this facility. Adjacent to that, and this is that building that's multiple floors there that you see in the far right side there, that's a new development. We would be building that from the ground up, and that will be 32 units of permanent supportive housing. So for those of you who are familiar with our site located on Spring Street, Jeff's Place, if you're familiar with the two buildings that we built on North Main Street, this building is anticipated to be very much the same kind of building. It's about 300 square feet of studio efficiency living for an individual who is formerly homeless. So our hope in developing the expanded affordable housing as well as this new facility with expanded services is that we're able to reduce the demand on homeless shelters and increase the number of people who are housed. So you'll see here that there is a dorm facility. There's a dining area here where we currently serve 3 meals a day to anyone who needs our assistance. We serve over 100,000 meals a year at Mainspring, and we intend to continue to do that. And we'll have a full-time operational clinic that provides primary medical care to anyone in need of our services. So really, this is a one-stop shop for anyone in need of housing resources. And one of the nicest transitions this site will represent for us is daytime services. What we'll be able to do at this site is accommodate people all day and give them a place of respite, of accessing resources where they don't have to leave. They can have an outdoor space that's behind the building where they can relax and then we'll have plenty of activity space and services on site for them to access. So for us, this is a really exciting opportunity. We believe it's an exciting opportunity for the community. And right now, what we're doing is our due diligence. We're assessing the site. We're exploring the geotech stuff to make sure that it's a buildable site. And we're still applying for financing. So that's where we're at with the project. And we're also recognizing, just as an aside, this Manley Street, for many of you may know, doesn't have a public transportation access point. So we are meeting with the BAT CEO next week. We are going to be talking about a bus stop and providing public transportation to this location because we know that that's a major hurdle for folks to get to a different location than 54 North Main Street. So We are again excited about this opportunity. We think this is the best opportunity for us to really convert our emergency shelter system in Brockton. And I think if there are no comments or questions from the panel here, I'll open it up. And if you want to,
I just want to introduce one of my colleagues.
Oh,
that
yeah,
came in,
sorry.
That's all. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Councilor at Large Tina Cardoza, who has joined us. And Dennis is the Ward 3 counselor in whose jurisdiction this will be located, if you'd like to say something.
Thank you, Council President. I do want to speak just briefly, and I want people to understand that when this project came to my attention, and it would come to my attention first as the ward councilor, the matter was discussed with the people from Father Bill's and naturally the mayor of the city of Brockton. And the mayor, as always, and he's done this since he's been mayor, and all the mayors have done it in the past, that when there's something to be built within the vicinity or within your ward itself, they always make contact with the ward councilor so that you can, know firsthand just what could be transpiring. And believe it or not, it was several months before that when the Plymouth County commissioners had notified me they wanted to use the property for something else, and I believe that's when the federal people said no. Right to them pretty much, and then it came to your direction because of the way it is hooked into, Title V naturally. So, in any case, I did at that point speak with the mayor, and I spoke with John, and that's when John even called me a couple of times after meeting with the mayor and indicated that we need to bring it to the council's attention. And I says, well, I think the first thing we have to bring it to the city council or large people and try to get together, try to put a meeting together so that they can hear just what we're doing, and that it doesn't become, because sometimes it does happen, that, we know more than what the people know, which isn't necessarily so, but I wanted to make sure everybody was filled in the council at large people, naturally, representing the city like the mayor represents, they had to be a part of the process. So that's what's brought us to this particular level. And as Mayor, I almost called you Mayor, Councilor Fowle, that was a long time ago. Council President Fowle and I were part of a Zoom meeting, and when we were talking about this, and I know a couple of councilors at large, I think, talked with John and them afterwards because they weren't available that day, but one of the things that we left with is, we should meet, we should bring people together, put it out there so that they know, and the council's done a great job in putting it out there on the social media. I saw it out there yesterday, saw it out there today, so. And we also announced at the council chambers as well that this meeting was being held. So, with that being said, I do have to say that, yes, it's a busy area there street-wise, but I mean, for anything to be really located there, I think this is the gem bit, to be truthful with you, because it'll just tie in with everything else that they're working at, and no hidden agenda. The Carlton House is under a different type of a situation with the homeless that we have there, and some people were surprised at how that turned out, but I have to say that program's been working well there. I think this one will as well. But like April said, they're in the beginning stages, and there's other monies that have to come into play. And I just want to, a few people had contacted me, and they've asked me, and I talked to John even earlier today. Some people seem to think that, when we do our budget every year, that the city council has a line item into Father Bill's place, and we're fanning out money from within the city, which is not true. It's not operated that way. And I want people to realize that. And even in this case here, I mean, the federal people have come in and they've, awarded this to them, and they want what they want to see there, which is for us to continue to do whatever we can to help our homeless people. And I think that's what's most important. So I don't want to keep going on, but I appreciate the people that are here tonight, and I appreciate the council at larges that are here, and then we'll keep moving forward as the time goes on, and I think we will have a successful building there at some point for our homeless people. So thank you, Councilor.
Councilor Cardoza, would you like to say a couple of words?
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and thank you for bringing this information to the public. I think this is very important. So hopefully we'll get it televised and people can share, and other folks can participate as the process moves along. I know we're in the very early stages, but can you speak to a little bit about what's going to happen to the old site And then maybe a little bit about, for folks who say we're not tackling the underlying problems of homelessness as a whole, some of the programs that you all will be committed to, such as Housing First, to sort of end homelessness, or, you know.
Sure, I can speak to the second part, and then I'm going to ask my colleague, John, to speak to the first part around the Mainspring site, the current Mainspring location. For Father Bill's and Mainspring, we are a housing first organization. And so what that means is we believe that homelessness is solved by one thing: housing. People who experience homelessness come from a variety of backgrounds and a variety of difficulties. And it's not to say they only need housing, but we do believe that housing is the first response to homelessness. And then we bring services. So the programming that we intend to offer here at the HRC really will be our staff and our resources will be focused around housing. So rehousing people, providing resources to get people placed into housing. Then we'll also have mental health services and substance use services, because as we know, many of the folks that experience homelessness do have secondary issues related to substance use and mental health, again, physical limitations and the like, and most importantly, poverty. Everyone who comes to our doors is extremely low income and simply cannot afford the rents in Massachusetts. So for us, our response is to try to place people into housing as soon as possible and then wrap services around them that will prevent them from experiencing homelessness again. And as I stated, and thank you, Councilor Cardozo, for that question, 93% of the time we house those folks, they stay housed for 3 years or longer. And those statistics speak for themselves. And I will add, the cost of housing someone for a year with a subsidy, so a deep rental subsidy plus services, is less expensive to the taxpayer than a year of shelter. And so for us, it makes good economic sense, and it makes good human service sense to improve someone's life by placing them into a home as opposed to a dormitory where they're sharing space with 70, 80 people, and it's less expensive. So for us, that's the response. But certainly the HRC will offer a variety of other resources where people may need short rental assistance. Maybe they need a little bit of medical care and then just upfront costs. Or maybe they just need to come for a support group or some sort of substance use intervention. And we intend to have all of that co-located at our resource center.
Great,
And
thank you.
John, if you can maybe speak to the Mainspring site. Oh, here, John, you'll need this. The camera needs the,
Yeah,
mic.
can't get away from it.
So for Mainspring, we have, it's got an opportunity of twofold. One would be is we are absolutely open to conversations with the city of Brockton about, again, if this site can occur, then there's no need for an emergency shelter in downtown Brockton. And our board and our organization is absolutely open to the conversation with the city of Brockton about repurposing that site, which would be a great opportunity, I think, for all parties. So we're absolutely open to it and look forward to that conversation, hopefully.
Awesome, thank you, John.
Sorry, say that again.
It's at 54 North Main Street.
So if we do this and the city still doesn't want it, if the city wouldn't want to talk about repurposing Mainspring? Okay. Father Bill's in Mainspring would look to develop more permanent housing there. Again, it's conversations that are just very preliminary about would the city of Brockton like to purchase the building? again, we will keep all of our options open, but we will absolutely look to, and have already started conversations with the city of Brockton to say, if this project come to fruition, that we welcome that opportunity. Yes.
Jack, I think at that point, we would have more meetings and we would solicit input, obviously talk to the Downtown Business Association and some of the abutters that are up in the area of Mainspring and determine what would you like to see happen. Frankly, any number of us probably have some ideas as to how the city could benefit from owning that property, but that is down the road. I think we have to go to step 1 and 2 first, but it's always been a goal, I think, of most counselors to try to provide a better environment for the homeless other than downtown where there are no services during the day and there's very little place for them to go. This, John used the term when we were on the call, wraparound services. And I kind of like that because it's all encompassing. It's not just you have a place to sleep and a place to eat, but there are going to be additional opportunities to try to help people get to the best possible place they can in life, and I think that should be a goal. Anyone else?
Yeah, that's a great question. Is it Jack? So the current facility does have a clinic that operates full-time by Brockton Neighborhood Health Center, and that's staffed with a full-time nurse practitioner and other medical staff who work with folks on their medical needs. And currently, we do have some case management where we work with the guests at the shelter on rehousing plans. It's fairly limited, and we aren't able typically to operate during the day. So the sort of 14-hour cycle of operations still is how Mainspring really operates. So people now in COVID time are able to stay in, but they really aren't accessing any resources on site at Mainspring House, other than some case management to try and get them connected to housing. Sure.
Anyone else? Awfully tame group here tonight. I don't know. We're not used to that.
So it's a great question, and I thought of that after I said that we were awarded the site. We don't have site control. So what that means is that we've gotten a letter from the Department of Health and Human Services, who owns the site, that provided we can get the financing, we will be awarded the site. So we haven't even signed a lease yet. So what will happen is we'll lease the property in order to do the site testing and establish that it's a buildable site. And provided we're awarded the financing, that's when we would be officially gain ownership of the location. Probably at least 6 to 8 months before we'll know about financing.
Just as a follow-up to that, when you talk about financing, and you know where the funds are coming from, where you talk about the current budget for downtown, but most of us don't. Could you elaborate on that as to where the financing comes from, whether it's from grants or agencies or state money or federal money, whatever the case may be?
Sure, and Councilor Farwell prompted me before you even had the opportunity to ask. So we have many public partners who fund all of our programming, including the shelter system. So the Department of Housing and Community Development really is the primary funder of shelter operations, as well as capital financing for low-income housing development. So there are different arms of the department, but they really are the primary funder. And then we pursue typically low-income housing tax credits, which is a combination of private and public funds to support developments, to support building the buildings. But our operating sources for individual shelter are really limited to the Department of Housing and Community Development and private resources, private donations. And I will say that the public funds that support our operation support about 40% of what it costs to operate. So we have to supplement that budget gap in the individual shelter operation with private fundraising. And it's a huge hurdle for individual homelessness to really have a more robust response. So I hope that answers your question. Sure.
Where this was the military armory, going to be residential, spot now, would it have to be, they have to go to zoning, for that, or is it just being A&R?
You know, where it's federal property, I don't have an answer to that. It's kind of an interesting question.
Okay.
Obviously, the sovereign government can do whatever it wants on its property, but we'd have to take a look at whether there would need to be a zoning change there.
Right.
I might also add that I had a constituent ask me to ask if we couldn't make sure that there are any intersection improvements there or sidewalks, because you may have pedestrian traffic. People might come out of the
Yes.
facility and want to walk down to the mobile station and get something, and this person was very concerned about that. And we'd work with Representative Cassidy and Majority Leader Cronin on issues like that, so.
And that is something that's there. I walked it, plenty of times myself, and there is no sidewalks on either side in that area there. And coming around the curve, actually, you can't even, the cars can't really see you, until the last minute. But that was my question there as far as zoning and A&Rs or whatever. Thank you.
Yep. In the back.
Stay for 24 hours and use services, or will they be limited to that? That's what the time
That
would have to
shorter window, yeah, no, it's a great distinction. So the emergency shelter, that would be the major change, is that would be 24-hour. Certainly, we'd have 24-hour security and support staff available to the housing site, but the HRC, the shelter program, would be accessible 24 hours. So yeah, absolutely. The guests who are coming in that you probably see come out of Mainspring during the day, they would be able to stay on site and access those resources all day.
That's actually a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
But it begs one other question for me there. A lot of people leave, and yes, there's underlying issues. Absolutely, or else they wouldn't be in the situation they're in. And I know alcohol and so forth are not allowed. And so they go next door to Perkins Park. Is it going to be the same situation here, where the playground on West Chestnut Street might see the same activity that Perkins Park does now?
Yeah, it's a great concern. It's a great question, and certainly an understandable concern. And at Father Bill's and Mainspring, for our emergency shelter guests, we have a good neighbor policy. Now, we can't control what people do. We can't prevent people from leaving our site, and there are some folks that maybe aren't engaging in the best behavior. I will say that a lot of the folks that frequent Perkins Park are not guests of ours. They are often mistaken as guests of ours. But I will also say that we do have a good neighbor policy, and our expectations of guests when they leave our site is that they're respecting the community. And if we do know that they are not doing that, we will intervene with them in terms of their accessing our resources and address that with them.
And are you going to be servicing just Brockton, or is your service area expanded outside of that?
So our service area has always been Plymouth County. But I will say about 65% of the people who access our resources are from a Brockton zip code. That's where they originate from. But we're a regional entity, and our Quincy shelter serves most of Norfolk County, and our Brockton shelter does serve Plymouth County folks.
If I could just say, the public funding that you get to serve homeless people, you can't say, I can only serve that one cow, right? If anybody walks up to the emergency room, walks up to the Brockton police station, walks up, comes, from Easton or Plymouth, we have to take them in that night, right? But we do our best, our team does our best, to realize they're back to the community that they're from. You can't turn somebody away because of the state contract that we have. Nobody can in any community. But we do really try to get them back to the communities that they're
April, would it, just a quick question, would it be safe to, accurate to say that if the geotech and all of the site evaluation goes forward, your board does, you've already voted that you will go forward there, and the funding is at least in place to begin, or at that point you would go out and then try to amass the funding?
So we are applying this fall for funding, and so we're optimistic, but we don't know if we'll be funded this round. So we would know in the early spring.
Representative Cassidy?
I'm actually not going to talk about this project, but Father Bills and John, I've known them for 30 years at the State House, and nothing but respect at the State House. I know Speaker Mariano says very good things about John and Father Bills, so I just want to give you kudos on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's go to this gentleman first.
Yeah.
So, are there any plans for this site to be a mixed use between families?
Yeah.
Yeah, are there plans for this site to be a mixed-use site between families and more of the transient population, or would it be just for the transient population? What are the plans around that?
So this site is intended to serve individuals. So we don't have intentions to have families placed here or residing here. It really is intended just for individuals experiencing homelessness. No, we currently have programs that serve families experiencing homelessness. We have 2 family shelter sites. We have about 150 families in housing and another about 100 receiving stabilization services. And we serve about 100 families in shelter sites all throughout the community where we're working with them on housing plans as well. Sure.
So how did you come to that decision?
For this site to just serve individuals? So, yeah, I mean, when this site came as an opportunity, we knew that we wanted to have a different response than what we're offering here at Mainspring House currently, and so it represented the opportunity to convert our individual shelter system really to be this housing resource response, and so that was the thought process we went through in prioritizing this site for individuals, because that's really where we have overcrowded emergency shelters right now accommodating individuals experiencing homelessness. And so this was an opportunity to depopulate that and really develop some new housing for individuals.
Question I have basically is that with the homeless population that you serve, some actually have drug addiction problems. Does Father Bills have like, do you assist anyone basically in getting them into like a TSS transition home to if they seek further help with drug abuse?
Yes, that's we partner with the substance use organizations, and we are constantly placing people into detoxes, TSS, long-term substance use treatment. That's one of the primary areas. When people want treatment, we do our best to connect them to that, recognizing that the substance use organizations have experienced dramatic cuts to their funding, and so bed availability is pretty limited, but yeah, we certainly help people get connected to those services. Jack in the back.
Oh, hold on 1 minute, Jack.
While it's slightly off topic, but somewhat related, could one of the councilors here just elaborate as to, for people who don't know, including myself, exactly what is going on, as they say, down the street from your location you're looking at the Roadway Inn in terms of housing for individuals?
I mean, I can speak to that, Jack, if that's okay. And Pat, maybe we can put the mic up here. If anyone else has questions, you can kind of come right down the hallway there. But so the Roadway Inn, which we started to rent about a year ago as a depopulation site for the Mainspring guests, really was a crisis response. So we were leasing that property, and then had an opportunity to purchase it. So we purchased it in the spring of this year, and then got financing to convert it to housing. So what's going on right now is we're in the process of converting the hotel rooms to permanent supportive housing. So when you look at the floor plans here, the Roadway Inn currently will be the Roadway Apartments by the spring of 2022, and it'll be 69 units of permanent housing, studio efficiency housing for formerly homeless folks in Brockton. So the people that are currently residing there as guests will be leased as tenants and receive support services, just like our Housing First model across the community now is working with folks in our housing. Sure. So the question, just for the folks maybe on watching this on cable access, is there a timeline for people who are placed into housing? And no, the short answer is there's not a timeline. It's permanent housing. So just like any one of us in this room would sign a lease and occupy an apartment, the folks that lease with us in our permanent supported housing program are tenants. They have tenant rights, and they can stay as long as they need housing. There is a component to the services we provide that helps people who might not need the support services move on to independent housing once they're ready for that. If they don't need our supports, then we certainly encourage them to move on to other types of housing. And subsidized housing if they just need the rental support. Again, if they don't need our case management, we don't want to require them to meet with us. Most of our folks stay a very long time because they have very complex needs. But many of our folks move on to independent housing, which is a goal, but I would say it's not a requirement. Yes.
Roadway apartments, is there a preference for veterans or a percentage of set aside for veterans, veterans first?
No, there's no preference for veterans. I would say veterans represent about 7 to 10% of our population in the homeless shelters. So there are certainly veterans at Roadway who will be leased into housing. But in that particular site, there's no preference for veterans. We have many housing programs and buildings, frankly, that are dedicated to veterans. Many have set-asides for veterans. In this particular location, because the residents that were placed there in a response to a depopulation need, the best way we could reduce the number of homeless in the community was to just lease the people that were residing there at that time.
Okay.
And so we didn't have any preferences other than homeless.
But the ones that are there now, do they qualify to actually be able to meet the requirements of renting or leasing at the Roadway Apartments?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Maybe the Manley Street and how it's going to support veterans to the housing service.
Yeah, thanks, John. So for those of you who aren't familiar with where the site is located, this image here is the site where it's located. And what you will see is right here, abutting the location, is the VA campus, the Brockton VA Hospital. And so what's really exciting, and we've already been having conversations with the VA about how we can partner in making sure the veterans who need our help in the HRC will be able to access the VA hospital more readily. We have VA-funded programs in our emergency shelter right now, so that sort of being able to sort of synchronize those services with the VA hospital that will abut it is really just going to enhance the services we're able to offer veterans. And we're in conversations right now about prioritizing veterans for some of the housing that we'll be building at the site. So having some dedicated units for veterans potentially.
Hello.
Hi.
What's the expected timeline of the project? What are key milestones we should look forward to?
Sure, that's a great question. So as I mentioned, we're in the process of applying for financing, which will be submitted at the end of this year. It takes several months typically to hear if you received the financing. And during that process, we'll be going through testing the site and having engineers out to see if it's a buildable site. And so we'll know by spring of 2022 if we're proceeding, if our intention is to proceed to get it, to start building, in which case, at that point, it gets to design. So your development work is really with architects and construction managers to get the designs set up for potentially maybe a fall or winter of 2022 groundbreaking.
Thank you. And how would a contractor go about placing a bid to be a part of the project process?
So I would be a good contact. I oversee our development projects, so and we can certainly include, and we love to include local contractors and local companies in our process. So would welcome that.
April, I just have a quick question, just curious. Of the 65% you said of your clients that are Brocktonians, is there data around how long they've been homeless?
We do have that data. We have length of time homeless. I don't have it necessarily broken out for, I could get that information for you for how many of the people from Brockton and how long they've been homeless. What I would say overall, about 20% of our population has been homeless a year or longer. And then the next greatest length of time for people to be homeless is about 3 to 6 months. Most of the people who come through our doors, though, are really accessing us for, a few weeks to a few months. So I think we have this image of people experiencing homelessness as those chronically homeless people living outside, struggling with all sorts of behavioral health issues. The majority of the people accessing our resources simply have maybe run into some life events in a housing crisis, and they use us for a short period of time, and they move on with very little help. And that's why our housing, our permanent housing, is really targeted to those folks that have those most complex needs and really represent the minority of the population, but are probably the most visible, and they use the most beds. It's too complicated data analysis for me to get further than
that's
that.
helpful.
But the more beds people access, the more nights they come in, they're using more space in our shelters.
Thank you.
No, that's.
People that are actually watching.
Oh, this is live.
Yes. So,
Want to start over?
We're not editing.
someone asked,
Okay.
can you please say what the gender of the population for this building will be? And will we be looking at like 100+ males, or what the population breakdown will be?
Sure, that's a great question. So you can see the shelter breakdown is 32 beds for females and 96 beds for males. Now, what I would say about that is that we're a mixed gender facility, and we accommodate people based on their gender identity. But what we've seen is it has stayed relatively consistent despite some increases in the female homeless population. It's relatively consistent. About 25% to 30% of people experiencing homelessness are female, and the balance of that are mostly male.
Okay, and the next question they have is, what's the impact on public safety being in the center, that they have Squad A, Ladder 1 downtown, Engine 3 on the north side, Engine 4, Ladder 4 on the east side, and over there, just Engine 5. Also close to the Brewster North Station and close to the police station, so that saying it may pull a lot of cruisers away from other areas. So they're asking what the impact on public safety would be.
I don't know that. Yeah, I don't think I can speak to the impact on public safety. What I can say, though, is that we partner closely with public safety for the police and fire, and we've worked very closely with them, and they're fully aware of our intentions here. And I would say that we take safety very seriously. So we intend to have 24-hour surveillance, both cameras and people on site securing the facility. I will also say that the abutting campus has 24-hour police security in the VA, and I'm not suggesting that they're going to provide any services to us, but they are going to be there. And certainly we partner closely with public safety and are cooperative with the police whenever there's a question about that.
Thank you.
If there aren't any other questions, what we will do from city council side is we'll obviously maintain close contact with John and with April. They're very forthcoming, very accessible, and as we progress through the different steps, we'll come back and we'll have another meeting, and we'll bring you up to speed as to where we are and allow for more questions, because oftentimes people who come to these meetings ask questions that some of us would never think of. So, again, we really appreciate all of you taking time out of your schedule and coming here this evening. We thank April, we thank John, and I guess with that, John, I don't know if you have any closing comments or?
Well, I would just say thank you, there is contact information on the program here. If you do have follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer any questions. And you can certainly shoot me an email, and I'm happy to discuss anything that you might have that you didn't maybe want to voice here. John, I don't know if you wanted to say anything. Okay. But thank you again. I really appreciate all of you coming out. It's a Thursday night, it's 7:30, and I do really appreciate you taking time out to talk with us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Maybe we can wish my daughter, Ren, a happy 12th birthday.
Happy
Thank you,
birthday.
Ren.